Great. We've got everybody. Got most everybody here. Okay, all right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's month of service presentation of how to navigate the Harris County Court System. My name is Nia Murray. I am the Programs Coordinator for Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the month of service collaboration. Also included is the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, and joining us today is Ms. Myra Hippolyte. Also, on behalf of our presenting partner with the Houston Bar Association, we have Mr. Omar Rival with Berg, Plummer, Johnson, and Rival, who's going to be providing the information for you all for today. But also included in the collaboration is Lone Star Legal Aid, the Earl Carl Institute, Houston Volunteer Lawyers, Harris Central Appraisal District, and the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. And together we make up a month of service. And basically what a month of service is a collaboration of all 8 of our organizations. We come together on a monthly basis and offer a variety of different workshops, resources, information for the communities that we all serve and have in common, so that we can kind of create a larger impact and reach more people relative to topics related to community empowerment, asset building, asset protection, and the maintaining of generational wealth. So on behalf of all of our partners, again, we want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Also, for any attorneys that are joining us today, thanks to the Houston Bar Association, any of our legal courses where you see a course number, you have the opportunity to take advantage of free CLE credit that's being sponsored by the Houston Bar Association. So thank you all for that. Just to kind of go over a couple of housekeeping things. This is your opportunity to ask questions, whatever you'd like of the presenter. He's the professional that we have providing the information for you today. We ask that you try to keep your questions to be as general as you possibly can, and not to get into any real detail about a particular situation or giving case information and things of that nature for him to answer, due to the fact that the information that is presented here today is for educational purposes only. Is not to be considered legal advice. However, if you do find yourselves in need of any civil legal services, then we do encourage you to reach out to our legal service partners and to our presenter if you guys have any questions or need any particular further assistance. We are recording the session, and the link of the recording will be sent out to everyone who is registered for today's presentation, as well as broadcasting live on our social media platform at Amos Houston TX on Facebook. So as you're asking questions, we try to ask that you keep the questions to be general, so that we can try to protect your privacy as much as we can and not have your personal detailed information kind of getting out there for everybody to be privy to. So with that being said, thank y'all again for joining us for today. And we're going to get right on into our introduction of our partner and presenter, and we're going to move right on into the presentation. So Ms. Myra, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ms. Nia. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Myra Hippolyte, and I work with the City of Houston Department of Neighborhoods, Office of Neighborhood Engagement under the direction of Division Manager Paul Green. On behalf of Mayor Sylvester Turner and Director Takasha Francis, we want to welcome you to the Month of Service partnership. This partnership is all about giving back free information to everyone. I don't care who you are. Make sure we are here to make sure that you are educated in the process, that whenever you're going through whatever stressor you're going through in your life, that you know that you have a team of partners that is here to help you with free information. A lot of times we go through a stressor and we say, oh my God, what's the first step? You know, I'm talking to an insurance agent, my house caught on fire. What do I say? What do I not say? Okay, I just got stopped and got a ticket. I need to find an attorney. What do I say? What do I not say? What do I tell the police officer? Things like that, that when you're going through a stressor, you got it. You know, Oh, I already got that information. I just got to go to Facebook Live, Amos Facebook Live page, or I got to go to YouTube. If I miss that virtual workshop, I'm going to go to Amos Houston on Facebook and I'm going to look and see, okay, wait a minute. What did Miss Nia or what did Harris County tell me about? Okay, I'm going to court system, Harris County court system. What do I have to do? How do I dress? What do I do? Where in Harris County do I go? Where's the office? Know that you're not alone, guys. Thanks everyone. I've got to rush because I'm going to another meeting. Nia, thank you so much for being one of those great partners. And just to let you know, one of our partners, Neighborhood Recovery, is the one that pays for all of our Zoom and all our administrative procedures and everything that we do. So please make sure to take time out of your busy schedule. We all are partners and we're all working on this together, but make sure when you have time to, if you see Mr. Paul Charles, tell him thank you. And if you see any of our partners, you see Mayor Turner, you see Harris County Tax Officer Director Takasha Francis, thank you for taking time out of their busy schedules to let their employees give back to the Houston community. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
With that being said, we certainly couldn't do any of these presentations without the volunteer efforts of all of the presenters, especially the attorneys. We know that you guys, you know, this is your peak time of the day. You know, these are your billable hours. So so for you to take time out and to volunteer to provide this information, we really do wholeheartedly appreciate it. So thank you very much, Amara. But we'd like to go ahead and have you introduce yourself, and then you can go right on into your presentation.
Sure. Thank you very much, Nia and Myra. It is an honor for me to be able to speak here at A Month of Service. You know, it is, as a lifelong Houstonian, frankly, something that I think each and every one of us should try to do to give back to our community. It's our obligation. It's our debt that we owe each other. And so whatever we can do to give back, we should. And so the best I will try to do today is to help explain how to navigate the Harris County court system. A little bit about my background is I'm a civil litigator. I sue insurance companies for a living. So I'm a plaintiff's attorney. I practice in both state and federal court around the entire state of Texas. So part of what I'm going to be telling you is about the Texas court system and the federal court system, but it's a bigger picture for you to understand what is going on right here in Harris County. So with that, I will start sharing my presentation so that we can get underway.
Okay, you're good to go.
So as I said, the goal today is to help explain about the Harris County court system. And so let's start with this. You know, many of us have been downtown and seen some of these relatively nice new buildings that came up in the last 15 to 16 years over on the side of downtown. The courthouse on the left is the criminal court building. It has the criminal courts at law and the criminal district courts. The court on the right is the civil courthouse, and it's got the civil courts at law, county civil courts at law, and the civil district courts. And so, you know, you might see it when you're walking by. You might have seen those buildings. You might have been to some of the buildings. You may have just seen it when you're at an Astros game and wondered, what are those things and who's there? What do they do? Well, part of what I want to do today is to demystify the whole system. Each and every one of us should understand how our community works. Each and every one of us should understand how our legal system works here locally. But what I want to do before we get into the specifics of the courthouse is an overall picture of the law. What exactly do laws do? What are they designed to do? What do they do? How can we use them to our advantage? Well, think about it this way. From an overall perspective, laws do one of two things. They either give us a right or they give us an obligation. And we know that when the founding fathers created the Constitution and they created the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are all about our rights. Our right is something we're entitled to do or entitled to receive. And when you think about the great rights that we have in this country, almost all of them come from the Bill of Rights. So those are things that are given to us. On the other hand, laws also give us obligations, something that we have to do or something that we should not do. And so Many times an easy example to turn to is criminal law. There are certain acts we should not do, or it's considered a crime in our community, in our state, in our country. And so the laws give and the laws prescribe. They give us rights, but they also prescribe a code of conduct that we as a society have agreed to live by. Those are the obligations. So now that we know what laws are designed to do, how do we use them in our day-to-day activities? Well, laws can be designed to plan ahead. If you are trying to start your own business, you go to the Secretary of State, you fill out paperwork to create your DBA or your corporation to help you organize your business. You can also create contracts, agreements between parties that outline what the parties are supposed to do. You can write a will, prepare what happens to you, to your loved ones after you are gone, and how your assets will be distributed. So that's planning ahead. And then, of course, the law is also designed to deal with problems after they happen. And we often think of the law as something that happens after an event. Criminal charges. The law is designed to help us navigate the criminal process. Civil cases. What happens when private parties sue each other in civil court? How does that process play out? Family law, probate law. There are so many areas of the law that are designed to deal with something after the fact. But sometimes we think that's all laws do. They don't. Laws also help us plan what we do. So globally, the laws can do one of those two things. Next page. Now, I would not be doing justice if I didn't start by telling everyone right off the bat where you can get help. Because many times, like I said, it can be an intimidating process to understand where you can go to get help. I'm a member of the Houston Bar Association, but the Houston Bar Association has been around and served the city of Houston and its residents for more than 150 years. So the number one resource I would recommend if you need help with a legal matter is you go to the Houston Bar Association webpage at hba.org. You'll learn about information about the Houston Bar Association. You'll get links to various organizations. And I have specifically cut and pasted the header because when you go into it, you'll see where to go. And when you click on community service, there'll be a drop down and they will give you access to these various organizations like the Houston Volunteer Lawyers, the Houston Lawyer Referral Service, Legal Line, Eviction Help, and others. These are different organizations, different groups that are designed to help the community. For instance, Legal Line has lawyers who volunteer to serve and take calls and help people pro bono. That means for free with whatever legal question they need help with, and refer them to the resources that can best assist them. The Lawyer Referral Service tries to put lawyers and community members in touch who need help with each other. And the Houston Volunteer Lawyers Association also helps with this process as well. And lastly, evictions. Evictions have been going up over the last few years. Many people need help. And so this is one of the sources I would personally go to first, the Houston Bar Association. On a statewide level, the state bar regulates lawyers in our state. And so texasbar.org.com is where you go to learn about the Texas Bar Association, to learn about the Texas Bar. There are all kinds of informational things you can get on the website. You can learn about where to get help. You get articles, you get information, you get contacts. And then lastly, there are so many organizations out there. I'll give you one example, Lone Star Legal Aid and other organizations that are pro bono organizations. They are designed to help members of the community for free. Because if we don't provide access to the court system, if we don't help our community understand how the system works and how to get help, we're not doing justice the way it's intended to be done. So I am starting my presentation with this. At the end of the presentation, I will put this screen up again. I will also have my contact information here. So if anyone wants a copy of this PowerPoint, I'll be happy to send it to you. I'll be happy to send you any of the links you see in today's presentation. But I want to make sure, most of all, the most important thing I can do is refer you to these resources because they are very, very helpful to our community. So let's talk about overall the justice system, because it breaks down into two categories. You've got the criminal justice system and the civil justice system. And based on what we know in our community, what we know in society, what we watch on TV and the movies, we may know more about one than the other. And I would wager to say it's probably the criminal justice system. As you look to this side of the page, you'll see, what is the criminal process about? It is the government versus someone accused of breaking the law. What is involved? Typically jail time or penalties. What is the burden of proof? This is the one thing that when I am picking a jury, I always hear members of the jury say, what's the burden of proof? Oh, beyond a reasonable doubt. I heard that on a TV show. I heard that in the movies. I've read about it. I know it. That's true. In the criminal justice system, the burden of proof the state has to meet is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a very high standard of proof. In fact, it's the highest standard of proof our law has, because we have decided that if we are going to penalize someone with jail time and take away their freedom or penalize them financially, we have to follow the highest burden of proof that the law gives. And we also have to understand the limitations of the criminal justice system. The criminal justice system, whether you think it's designed to punish or whether you think it's designed to hold people responsible, has limits in what it can do. And so many times the victims of those crimes may not get anything. Now, there are some funds out there like the Crime Justice Fund that the state has. There are some funds that are set aside that are designed to try to reimburse some portion of the victim's losses. But the reality is the criminal justice system has limits on what it can do. And so in many cases, the victim may not get anything. And I understand that may have been one of the questions I can get to at the end of this presentation, but there are some concerns that victims have. That when will my voice be heard? Who represents me in this criminal process? And that's where we get back to the first point. Really speaking, when you look at it, it's the government versus someone accused of breaking the law. The victim is not, strictly speaking, a party in the criminal justice system. Now, on the other hand, when you look at the civil process is every other type of case that doesn't involve criminal penalties. So most of the time you're dealing with private parties. You typically are dealing with the recovery of money or property, or trying to determine the rights between different parties. You sometimes have the government involved as a party, although not often. And typically the government is not interested in what happens in a private case between private parties in a civil case. They're not usually a party. They usually don't have a stake in the end result. So the government doesn't typically play a role in the criminal process, the civil process. But here's what I think is very important for everyone to understand. The burden of proof is completely different. We talked about beyond a reasonable doubt in the criminal justice system. Well, the civil justice system's burden of proof is called a preponderance of the evidence. And that is a fancy legal term, but the best way that I can describe it, and you'll hear different lawyers describe it differently, is if you think about the scales of justice, and you think of Lady Liberty with her eyes bound because she's blind, because she doesn't play favorites, she has in her hands a scale, and that scale is empty on either side. Well, when you think about the civil process, you're putting evidence on either side of that scale. And at the very end of the case, when the scale is tipped ever so slightly in one direction or the other, that's a preponderance of the evidence. It's not that beyond a reasonable doubt burden of proof. It is much, much lower. It's 51%. It's 50.1%. So if you think of stack of papers, 200 pages here, 200 pages there, you take one page from one stack and put it on the other side. Well, the preponderance of evidence is right there now, where there was one page more, one grain of sand more, ever so slightly amount more. So the civil justice system's biggest difference that I would tell everyone is the burden of proof is completely different. And that's very important for us to understand as we go through and look at the different cases and different courts we're looking at, because in every situation, we're dealing with that preponderance of the evidence standard, not the criminal standard. And so if you're in family court, if you're in civil court, if you're in probate court, almost always you're dealing with that preponderance of the evidence standard. So let's go through the typical process, the overview you might have in a criminal case. The criminal case typically starts out with either an arrest or a notice to appear in court. Then you go to the first court appearance where the defendant goes into the courtroom and makes his or her first appearance with or without a lawyer, and we'll get to how that process works. Then there's a preliminary hearing where the defendant either pleads guilty or not guilty. The case develops. There can be pretrial negotiations or plea bargaining between the government and that individual defendant on whether or not what we call in the civil case is whether it will be settled. But in the criminal process, it's called plea bargaining. I have been accused of this crime. I will agree to plead guilty to this much lesser crime with this much lesser penalty. And there are a variety of reasons why that kind of bargaining goes on. It's a part and parcel of the criminal process. After that process goes on, which can go on anytime through the criminal case, you have pretrial motions, you have hearings, and then finally trial itself. On the other hand, when you get to the civil case is very different. The civil case starts when the plaintiff files a petition in civil court. The plaintiff, meaning the person who is suing, then serves the defendant, the person who is being sued. The defendant then appears in the case and files an answer. And you'll see here, the next step is called discovery. I just put it as one word. What I would say is, if you look at the typical civil case, the bulk of what goes on a day-to-day basis is discovery. Taking depositions of the parties, sending out written questions, getting questions and answers back, exchanging documents, exchanging evidence, getting documents or taking testimony of witnesses or third parties. That discovery process takes up most of the time in a civil case. And then finally, you get to trial. Now, you'll see here that one thing I didn't talk about yet, and I'm going to talk about this as we go through this, is like many things in the world and society, COVID changed how the civil justice system and the criminal justice system worked because the courts were shut down, but the cases don't stop. They have to continue. And so there was already e-filing for both criminal and civil cases. But what did change is you had defendants appearing by Zoom, like we're communicating right now. You had depositions being taken by Zoom. You had mediations, settlement conferences, pretrial bargaining, everything going on by Zoom. You even had bench trials before judges by Zoom. And there was even a time where there were jury trials by Zoom. And then the Texas Supreme Court weighed in on that fairly recently, I believe it was late last year, and ordered jury trials back in person. But my point is that COVID changed a lot of what we do at the courthouse. In many ways, I think it made it even more accessible for members of the public to see what goes on. But like anything else, you have to know where to go. So some of the links I will be sharing will tell you where to go to see what goes on. You might have had the opportunity 20 or 30 years ago, if you had nothing else to do, to walk down to the courthouse downtown, check in, talk to someone and say, hey, what trials are going on? I just want to watch, and walk into any given courtroom and watch. You can still do that today. And you always have that right as a member of the public. But what's changed is you might be able to log in to the Zoom process and see what's going on online. And you don't have to walk into the courthouse. So in everything that we do here in Harris County, we try to make it more accessible for people to see what goes on in the courtrooms. So let's talk about who decides cases. Well, the famous quote you always hear is the judge decides the law, but the jury decides the facts. Now, what does that really mean? Well, think about a typical case where you're dealing with a breach of contract. A breach of contract requires certain elements. You have to have a contract. Someone has to have breached the contract. The person who breached the contract has to have caused damages to the other person or the other party. And so before you ever get to trial, you can have discovery going on about those issues, and then you can have one party file a motion, a pretrial motion. It's called a motion for summary judgment. Sometimes it's called a motion to dismiss, where the judge has to decide, look, before we even get to a jury trial, let's evaluate, did you, the plaintiff, prove that there was a contract? Do you have any evidence that there was a contract, that the contract was breached, or that you were damaged by that breach? Are there facts? And are those facts you've provided, is that evidence you've provided admissible if we get to a jury trial? So the judges decide issues like that every single day. And then when you get to a trial, the jury considers the evidence. The jury decides the facts. The jury listens to the witnesses, reads through the documents, looks at the photos, watches the videos. The jury assesses the credibility of witnesses. Now, let's stop there for a second. Some people are uncomfortable with that and say, who am I to judge my fellow person? But if you think about it, we do that every day in our day-to-day life. Someone tells us something and we think about it. Does that make sense? Does it sound accurate? Is there something that doesn't make sense about what I just heard or what I was just told? When we are making those decisions every single day, we're evaluating the credibility of a witness or the credibility of a person. That's what juries are designed to do. And then finally, the jury decides, has the party met its burden of proof? Like we talked about in a criminal case, has the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt their case? In a civil case, has the plaintiff proven by a preponderance of the evidence their case? It is the jury that decides whether a party has met its burden of proof. So let's talk about the right to a jury. Where does it come from? Well, we talked about the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights enshrined many, many critical, vital rights for any member of society, and certainly for our government. And the Bill of Rights has been followed and copied by many, many countries around the world ever since. Well, look at the Seventh Amendment. The Seventh Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, I've copied it right there. But if you actually read the text of the Seventh Amendment, it says in any suit where the value in controversy is more than $20, there's a right to a jury. It's right there in our Bill of Rights, in the U.S. Constitution. It's not just there, it's also in our Texas Constitution at Article 1, Section 15. And it's a much more pithy comment where it says the right of trial by jury shall remain inviolate. That is a very strong statement from a legal perspective. The right to a jury is one of the most important rights we have, period. So, okay, I understand it's important to have a jury. I understand the jury does these things in court. Why should I do it as a member of the community? Well, by serving on a jury, by participating in jury service, each and every one of us make sure that our community is properly and equally represented. Each and every one of us that serves on a jury or even appears for jury duty is making sure we have an equal direct voice, that justice is done in those courtrooms every single day. In the criminal courtrooms, in the civil courtrooms, in the family courts, in the probate courts, in the tax courts, everywhere. What I was just talking about when we were talking about evaluating the credibility of a witness, again, that's something we do every day. And this is the most important message I can give you about jury service. You don't need any specialized knowledge. You certainly don't need to be a judge. You certainly don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to have any legal training. You don't need to have a college degree, high school degree, graduate degree, any of that. By being a member of the community, you are qualified to serve on a jury. It is not an intimidating process. It's our process, and it only works if we participate in it. Each and every one of us that serves on a jury makes sure that justice is served because we decide the facts. And many important cases started with a jury trial. I will give you one example. There is a case in the U.S. Supreme Court called Gideon versus Wainwright. Gideon versus Wainwright is a criminal case that came out of Florida, and it deals directly with the Sixth Amendment, the right to a jury trial. Clarence Earl Gideon was arrested for a crime, and when he went to the Florida State Court, he said, "I can't afford a lawyer. Will you appoint one for me? Because the right to a lawyer is a Sixth Amendment right in the Constitution." And the Florida court said no. Following U.S. Supreme Court law at that time, they refused to do it. So Mr. Gideon served as his own lawyer. He did his opening statements. He cross-examined witnesses. He put on witnesses on his behalf. He did not testify on his own behalf. He did his closing arguments. He served as his own lawyer. And unfortunately, he was convicted and he got a 5-year prison sentence. From prison, he hand wrote a request for an appeal that ended up going to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court looked at the case and unanimously in a 9-0 verdict said the right to a jury trial is a fundamental right in our Bill of Rights. But that case would not have made it to the U.S. Supreme Court if there wasn't a jury to have served in that case so that it could get to a final result, so that it could be appealed, so that it could get to the U.S. Supreme Court. So the right to a jury trial and the role that juries play is very important. If any of us had a case, we would certainly want a jury sitting in the box serving. All right, so we talked about the role of a jury. Now let's think about, what does a trial look like? Well, many of you have seen, start with voir dire or jury selection, where the potential jury pool is sitting there and the lawyers get to ask questions, the judge asks questions, and then out of that, a group of either 6 jurors for county court or some of the lower courts, or 12 jurors for the district courts is selected. Then you have opening statements, then you put on your evidence, and that's what we're looking at here. Evidence can be documents like contracts, emails, letters, texts, any written documents. It can be photos, it can be videos. But evidence isn't just tangible evidence. Evidence is testimony. So when a witness takes the stand and swears that they're going to tell the truth, their testimony is also evidence. And that's why we said the jury has to evaluate the credibility of those witnesses. The evidence has to be admissible. It has to be based on facts, not someone told me this, or I heard that, or someone told this and then told that, and then I might have heard it that way. It has to have a certain credibility and reliability in order to be admitted. And that's where the judge decides on these rulings, which we'll talk about. There can also be physical evidence. So you might have in a car wreck, every now and then you can have parts of the car brought in, like the bumper, to show, oh, the car was hit here, here's where the damage was done, and this is what it indicates from an expert testimony perspective. And I put other because the law changes all the time, but it changes based on technology. So in the future, there can be other forms of evidence that will be heard in trials. I touched on this briefly, objections. You can, as a lawyer, put forth your evidence, or as a litigant, put forth your evidence, but the judge decides whether it will be heard by the jury, whether it's admissible. So I have listed some of the common objections you hear in a trial, like hearsay. Did you hear that evidence from someone else? Or is it something based on your personal knowledge? And there are all kinds of exceptions. The joke in law school is you take a whole course on evidence and hearsay, and it gets more confusing the more you learn about it. But that's one of the main objections that you'll hear in a trial. Relevance. Is the evidence relevant to what's being disputed between the parties? Past allegations of wrongdoing. Just because someone did something wrong years ago doesn't mean it should automatically be admitted in this case. Character evidence. This person is known for being this kind of person in the community. This person has a reputation for this. You, generally speaking, want trials to be tried based on the evidence you've got, not based on something that's not related to the case. And so there are rules about that. And then there's another one that even though you have relevant evidence, maybe there are other considerations that substantially outweigh that relevance. It's a tough rule for courts to administer, but it deals with bias and prejudice, confusion of the issues, wasting of time, and so forth. So you might say, okay, you paid 7 years of your promissory note, but in year 7, month 13, you stop paying. Well, why would you waste the jury's time going through 7 years of invoices when you can get right to the one that was not paid? So sometimes it's designed to narrow down the trial. And then there can be other objections as well. This is just some of the ones you'll see. Now, we've got an overview of how the trial process works. Let's get to the different types of courts we have here in Texas and in the US. On the lowest level, and you have them pretty much at equal levels, you have municipal courts. These are what you might call city courts. They deal with city ordinances, city laws, city matters. Then you have justice of the peace courts. They've been called different names, JP courts, you might hear. They used to be called small claims courts, but these are courts where the disputes involve less than $20,000, or you're dealing with a landlord-tenant matter, or small criminal matters. And small criminal matters can be tried in municipal court or justice of the peace court, depending on what it is. So many times, if you're dealing with a traffic ticket, you'll be in municipal court or JP court, plus these other disputes. Then you go a level above that, state and county courts. And the county courts have something called county courts at law, and then you have district courts. And we're going to talk about in a little more detail what the difference is between them. But you have criminal county courts and civil county courts. Then you have criminal district courts and civil district courts. So you really have two parallel systems in the civil and criminal court system here in Texas. When you go past the district and county courts, you get to the courts of appeal. You've had a jury trial, or you've had a dispositive motion decided by the court, and you get an appeal to the Court of Appeal. And then beyond that, you have the Supreme Courts within our state. And then finally, you also have downtown on Smith Street, the federal courthouse, federal district court, which tries federal court cases based on federal laws. And that is like I said, a different parallel system. It doesn't deal with Texas cases or Texas law, generally speaking. And then when you appeal from the district court in Houston, it goes to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal, which is based in New Orleans. And then in the federal side, if you go above that, it's the US Supreme Court. But let's go back and focus a little more on our Texas court system. So let's start at the bottom. We talked about the municipal courts. We talked about the justice courts. On the county level, like we're talking about here, you have constitutional county courts that are created by the state constitution. Many times these will be things like tax courts or other specialty courts. You have probate courts. Probate courts are where you go when you're dealing with wills and estates, typically when someone has passed away. And the question is, what happens to how their property is distributed? And then you have county courts at law. They deal with disputes, generally speaking, at a lower level than the district courts, which are right above that. So you'll see district courts are the level right above that. You have civil district court and criminal district court. And then when you go past that, you have the courts of appeal. Here in Houston, just a few blocks from both the civil and criminal courthouses where I showed you the pictures earlier, we have our historic courts of appeal. The 1st and the 14th courts of appeal are based right here in Houston, and they handle appeals that come from both civil and criminal cases. And then the final level of appeal in Texas, I bet you didn't know there are in essence 2 Supreme Courts. What we call the Texas Supreme Court only deals with civil cases. And then you have criminal courts. The Court of Criminal Appeals is the equivalent of the Supreme Court, the court of last resort for all criminal cases. So what is important to understand is you have 2 separate systems, whether you're in civil court or whether you're in criminal court. Now, we went through this whole process, but let's talk about the categories. What are the courts we have here in Harris County? Well, we just talked about criminal courts. Criminal courts are based on charges based on alleged criminal conduct. Civil courts, like we talked about, often involve disputes over money, or property or the relationship between parties. Family courts, which primarily deal with the relationship between parties like divorce, child custody, and so forth, rights like that. Probate court, like we talked about, that deal with the estates of people who've passed away and what happens to their property. And then we have the other courts we talked about, justice courts, municipal courts, courts of appeal. So let's go through what these courts are, where you can find them, and how you can get more information, because this is a very important thing. If you're dealing with any of these courts, or you have a case in any of these courts, or you know someone who does, and you have questions, whether you have a lawyer or you don't, you might have questions about who's the judge, what are the deadlines, what's the case about, how can I search this information? Let's start with the Harris County Criminal Courts at Law. Every single one of these pages from here on will give you a link. There are 16 of these courts. They have exclusive jurisdiction of misdemeanor criminal cases, where the fine is more than $500, but jail time is not more than a year. So it's a very specific set of criminal cases. These criminal courts at law also deal with appeals that come out of municipal courts and justice of the peace courts. So if a case is tried down there, let's say a traffic ticket, and it goes all the way, and then the person wants to appeal it, it takes on a brand new trial in criminal court at law. Then one level above that, Harris County Criminal District Courts. There are 23 of these district courts, and they have original jurisdiction for felonies. So the important thing to understand is if you're dealing with misdemeanor, you're in criminal court at law, Harris County Criminal Courts at Law. You're in district court if you're dealing with felonies. Now, that's the criminal side. Here's the civil side. For the Harris County Civil Courts at Law, there are 4 courts, and I've given you the names of all these judges. What's important to understand about the civil court process system is the civil courts have concurrent jurisdiction. That means you have a choice where you can sue. These civil courts have jurisdiction up to $250,000. So you could sue for $21,000 all the way to $250,000. And you can do that in the civil court at law. They also have original jurisdiction for eminent domain and inverse condemnation. So if you ever deal with a situation like that, you're always going to be in civil court at law with one of these 4 judges right now. Now, remember I said that one of the things that came out of COVID is we were able to offer more access to the courts. There's the live stream and Zoom link right down there. So anytime you want to see what's going on in one of these courts, you click on that link and you'll have the opportunity. It's as if you're in court to see exactly what's going on. All right. We talked about the civil courts at law. Now let's talk about the civil district courts. Here's the link to those courts. There are 24 district judges. There are 2 MDL judges. It's called multi-district litigation. These judges, these positions came out of a governor appointment, but essentially they are designed to deal with cases that are all across multiple districts within the state, and they get consolidated in one of these 2 courts. And then there are 2 tax master judges. They deal with tax matters. So if someone is not paying their property taxes for multiple years and there's a lawsuit, that lawsuit goes to the tax master judge court. The civil district courts have cases involving titles to land, election contests. So if any of you are following the election contest cases, those have been, they're being tried in the civil district court right now. Civil matters where you're dealing with $200 or more. So you might say, now hang on a second. Didn't you just say that justice of the peace courts go up to $20,000? You had the civil courts at law that go up to $250,000. And now you've got the civil district court that can start all the way down to $200. Why would you go here? Why would you go there? Why would you go somewhere else? Those are the kinds of things lawyers debate all day long. And those kinds of decisions are tactical decisions based primarily on how long it'll take a case to get tried. The civil district courts have big dockets of thousands of cases. The courts at law also have big dockets, but generally speaking, those judges will try to get you to trial within a year. The civil district judges will do the same. But as with many things, COVID created a backlog of cases that the courts are still working their way through. And then, of course, you've got the justice of the peace courts. So if you have a dispute involving $200 or more, you could theoretically file it in any of those three courts. But for a variety of reasons, you might decide which court to file it in. Now, we also have specialty courts. I've listed them. These all primarily come out of the criminal court system, whether it's the Star Adult Drug Court, which deals with recovery for substance abuse and mental health disorders, Veterans Court, which deals with mental health and addictions treatment for veterans, and then you've got Felony Mental Health Court. These are courts that are designed to take away the expense of criminal case processing, the crushing docket that these courts have, and to try and find new and improved ways to deal with ways for criminal defendants to not be overly penalized when they're dealing with specific situations. Some of these are voluntary programs. These are not the kinds of programs where anyone can go. They have to meet certain narrow categories. And then competency restoration. If the state has ruled that someone is incompetent and they want to challenge that, you go to a specialty court for that. Now, there's also probate court, because remember I said, if you are dealing with a situation where someone has an estate and how their estate is distributed and what happens to their assets, you're going to be in one of these four courts in Harris County. Here's the link to it, so anyone needs it. These are the names of the judges. When you go to the link, you'll go to the individual judges' pages. You'll find names for their case coordinator or their clerks. This goes for any of the links I've posted, by the way. You've got phone numbers and email addresses in many cases. In many situations, you can go to the case dockets. You can find out when trials are being tried. You can go to, if you know a case number, you put it in, you'll see the setting history for that case or motions. So there is a wealth of information you can get when you go to these various websites. There are also family courts as well. I didn't go into that in much detail, but as with anything else, the family courts have their own page, their own website. You can go there and get information about what you might need to know, the courts, the judges, their local rules, their requirements. If you need to contact the court or the clerk or the case coordinator, all that information is there. But I want to touch briefly on something that hasn't happened yet, but it's starting September 1st, 2024, business courts. And this is something that frankly is exciting about the law. No matter what you know, it's always changing. The law is ever evolving. And so that's an important thing to understand, that the way the Texas legislature voted, it created an entirely new system of courts that is designed to work on specific disputes for businesses. There will be 11 geographically divided courts. The first 5 divisions are going to be in the most populous regions: Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, and San Antonio. So we will be getting business court here in Houston next year. There is also, remember, just like we talk about district courts, you have to have a court of appeals that goes above that. So this law created a new 15th court of appeals that will have the exclusive jurisdiction to cover appeals from these business court cases. The cases can be either bench trial or jury trial. It's up to the parties. They're allowed to have jury trials, but as with anything else, the contract governs. So if the parties have a contract that says, we agree to waive a jury trial and we will have the case tried before a judge, then the case will be tried before a judge. Now, you might be wondering, well, wait, I own a small business. What is this new category of court I've never heard of? I haven't followed. They're creating new rules, new courts, new judges, new courts of appeal. How do I know if I even have to deal with this court? Well, this is the important thing to understand: the jurisdiction. These courts have concurrent jurisdiction with the district courts. That means they share jurisdiction to preside over certain kinds of cases. So if you're dealing with $10 million or more in a contract dispute, and the parties agree to go to business court, they go to business court. If they're dealing with $10 million or more under certain rules of the Texas Finance Code or Business Code, they go to this business court. And there are a few other categories as well. The point is, I don't want to scare anyone into worrying about what is going to happen with my case, with my small business. Unless you're dealing with these jurisdictional requirements and numbers, your case for your business will not go to business court. If you fall under these categories, you need to be aware that business court is something that's coming and will have a different set of courts for a different set of cases. So the most important thing I think we can all learn is look before you leap. Whether you have a lawyer or whether you don't have a lawyer, if you fall into a situation where you're dealing with a legal case, or you have a friend or family member who is, or you might need to start a legal process, do your research first. And that's why I'm putting this up again. If you have any questions, if you need resources, if you need links, if you just have questions about where to go to the Houston Bar Association webpage, click on community service like I showed below, and go to one of these organizations, figure out what might be best for you that you might need help with, where you can ask questions about specific law, specific cases, specific resources, and you should be able to get the help you need. Beyond that, like I said, you've got all the various links here in this presentation for all the various courts. You've got links to the Zoom links to see what's happening in these courts. That goes for the civil courts at law, the civil district courts. The criminal courts have them too. The criminal county courts and the criminal district courts have those links as well. And so if you're dealing with one of these cases or you just want to see what's happening, you can always click on those links and see what's happening. And you're always welcome to go visit the courts. The courts are open and they are there for each and every one of us. And it is our job, not just to use the courts, but to participate in the courts. And so if you ever do get that jury summons, instead of calling up a friend and saying, how do I get out of jury duty? Start thinking to yourself, what is my role? Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Yeah, it might be a little inconvenient, but what is my role as a member of society? What can I learn about the way our process works? What can I do? Donate half a day or a full day of my time to go down to the courthouse, be part of jury selection. Maybe I get picked, maybe I don't, but at least I will know how the process works. And I will know that I did my part as a member of the community to keep it moving forward. So again, if there's anything you need help with, these are your resources. You've got your resources on the links I've posted. And if you have any questions, this is my contact information. This is my phone number. This is my email address. If there's anything I can do to help, all I do is sue insurance companies. I don't do a lot of the other things we were talking about today. But regardless, whatever I can do to help any of you, I'd be honored.
All right. Thank you very much. There were a couple of questions that and I know you had addressed the one about the COVID. How do you go about talking to a judge regarding an arrest made if you were the victim?
Good question. And I remember hearing that question just before the presentation. As a victim, you strictly speaking are not a party to a criminal matter. You can certainly request to be heard by the court, but what you probably want to do is pull up the case number, look on the criminal court webpage, look to see who the prosecutor is representing the government and contact that prosecutor. Remember, the judge is not an interested party in the case, and the judge does not have the ability to start picking who will be heard at trial and who will not be heard at trial. The government is the one who has to put on their case in chief. And many, many times the government will put witnesses on who are victims of crimes. So I would say start with the prosecutor. You can also look at the court website and try to contact the court. But again, the judges are somewhat limited in what they're able to do with relation to how they're communicating with the victims.
Okay, next question here, and they may have been a little bit biased when they asked, why does the Harris County Clerk always mislead pro se litigants and schedule hearings without a judge's signature for the attorneys?
I will say this, the Harris County clerks are constantly working to upgrade the system. And so I know, for instance, that they have created an online date system where you can create hearings and get a hearing set for a date certain. But just because you get a hearing doesn't mean that's enough. You then have to create a notice of hearing and send it out to all the parties involved in the case. And you have to do it within what the rules require within the notice requirements before that hearing is held for it to be an effective notice of hearing. I can't speak to what the clerks do or do not do regarding notices specifically for cases, but I will say that if you're a litigant or a lawyer, you can always contact the clerks to schedule a hearing in a specific case. You can always go to the district clerk's website or the county clerk's website to go through the process of how to get a hearing scheduled.
And when they ask a question about pro se means that they're representing themselves, correct?
Correct. Pro se means you don't have a lawyer, you're representing yourself.
Okay, so what is some of the biggest misconceptions or the most common mistakes that you see from people that are representing themselves when they're trying to navigate through this? Like, somebody may have gotten something scheduled, but they probably didn't even know that they needed to send out a notice of hearing to the other parties and things of that nature. What is something that you would recommend for somebody that's trying to represent themselves?
I think the biggest obstacle to representing yourself is you have to know the court rules. Pro se means you represent yourself, but the courts still require everyone to follow the rules of civil procedure or the rules of criminal procedure. So there are a set of rules, whether you're in criminal court or state court, called the Texas Rules of Criminal Procedure or the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure. Number one, you have to follow those rules. So if you are a pro se litigant, if you're in a criminal or civil case, get a copy of those rules and make sure you understand what your obligations are. Number two, if you know the judge and the court you're in, you need to go to the website of that court and you need to look for something called local rules or local procedures. Some judges have certain ways they want things done. If you file a motion, they want a proposed order. They want the proposed order written a certain way. Or if you're filing a notice of hearing, you generally speaking have to e-file it. So you have to go to the district clerk or the county clerk's website. You have to register, create an account, put in an email address, and learn how to electronically file these documents. I will say that the way the rules are interpreted in the civil or in the district courts and county courts are pretty strictly construed. When you're dealing with justice of the peace court or municipal courts, the judges there deal with more pro se litigants than attorneys. And so they will do their best to help. But again, you have to know the rules of the court you're in.
In other words, don't try to become a Law and Order attorney over the weekend, binge watching, and then automatically assume you know how the court process works. Because I know a lot of us, oh, that's not right, because I remember on Law and Order, I saw blah, 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 whatever. So yeah, so it's best to definitely talk. To be on the safe side, and I know that the Bar Association has the legal lines. Would someone be able to contact or call the attorney just to say, hey, I'm going through this. This is what I have. Can we make sure that this is correct?
Absolutely. Legal Lines is designed to answer those types of questions. And, Legal Lines can do one thing where it's answering a specific question, like where do I go for this resource? Or it can be, I need a lawyer for this type of case. And in that situation, Legal Line will generally refer you to the Houston Lawyer Referral Service. So I would also encourage anyone who's a pro se litigant, if you need help, try to contact the Houston Lawyer Referral Service, because they might be able to put you in touch with a lawyer who can help you out in your case. But Legal Line is designed to answer those types of questions and point you in the right direction to get you the help you need.
And don't automatically assume that you won't qualify for legal assistance. So definitely reach out to those legal aid organizations as well.
Correct.
There was a question here. Is it possible a criminal case might be overturned to a civil case or vice versa based on the evidence or elements?
Not that I'm aware of. Generally you fall under one or the other. So I'll give you an example. You might have a case of fraud where someone says they signed my name to a check and that's not my name. Someone fraudulently forged my signature. Well, if you make that complaint to the county attorney or to the Houston Police Department, they can create a criminal case. And there can be a criminal investigation and potentially someone can be prosecuted, and that's a criminal case. Or they may say there's not the evidence to pursue it as a criminal matter. And then you can sue the person who you believe forged your signature on the check. Well, when you sue someone, you are in a civil case. You don't typically have them interacting like that where they're going back and forth. You're under one or the other. You can have two cases involving similar facts in criminal and civil courts, but they're two different cases.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, she says, thank you very much. Let me go back to the chat here. Well, those were all the questions that were in the chat, and I don't see anything that's on Facebook here.
I do see one question. I think it might have been about business courts, asking where these courts will be housed.
Go ahead.
I don't know. The business courts are going to be here, and there will be a division here in Houston. I expect them to be in the civil district court, but I'm not 100% sure. So that's the kind of thing that we'll learn as we get closer to it. But I don't have an answer for you at the moment.
Is there a time frame from what the anticipated date of having those courts?
I would expect we'll be hearing something about it very quickly. We're now less than a year away from those courts opening. That means you've got to have rules for those courts. You have to have judges appointed for those courts. You've got to create the physical locations for those courts, and so forth. So I think it's the kind of information that if it's not already out there, it will be very soon.
Gotcha. Now, you were talking about the rules and procedures, or the local rules. You said to look up if it's a local court, to look up the court where you're going. But if it's the district or the county or the criminal procedures, where does somebody find those general rules of information?
Well, two places. You start by number one. Let's just focus on a criminal case. You start with the Texas Rules of Criminal Procedure. Those are statewide rules that dictate what happens in the case, in the criminal case. And those are the rules the courts have to follow. Number two, you then go to the individual court. So let's say you're in County Court at Law number 13, Judge Raul Rodriguez. You Google his name, you go to the website for County Court at Law number 13, you click on it, and then you look and see, okay, what does Judge Rodriguez have for local rules or local procedures? In other words, what I'd call preferences. What are the things this judge wants done their way? The judge's procedures are not going to overrule the Texas Rules of Criminal Procedure. They're not going to be conflicting with that. They just fill in the blanks on some additional details that it is helpful to know, so that when you're doing something in that court, you know to do it the right way, so you don't get a motion or a filing rejected, or you don't accidentally leave your social security number out there unredacted, or something where you could cost yourself by not following the local procedures.
Yeah, definitely. And then I'll look up and see if I can find a link for the Texas Rules of Criminal Procedure, and I'll include it. I'll go back through the slides, the links that you included on your presentation, and make sure that everyone has access to those links for referral information as well. So is there anything else or any other things that kind of came to mind as you were going through your presentation? Just want to make sure I don't have any other questions here.
I think the main takeaway is, like anything else, doing the research is important. You know, being involved in any kind of case can be intimidating. It can be scary, but the information is there. And I'm not saying each and every one of us has to start anew and search for hours and hours for this kind of information. The Houston Bar Association is there for our community. And so that's where I'd start my questions and see where I can get pointed in the right direction to save time on my research and my investigation before I figure out what I need to do. But the resources are there for each and every one of us. We as an association are here to help, and we'll do our best.
Okay. And I'll make sure I include the information for the lawyer referral service and the legal lines information as well, for those that may have questions or trying to figure out how to navigate and manipulate through the court system. So thank you very much, Amar. I really appreciate your time. We know that there's a lot of folks that are out there that don't know where to go to get this kind of information, that don't know where to start, don't know where to begin, have so many questions, especially when they can't afford an attorney to represent them and they're trying to do things on their own, when they're trying to maneuver through the system. What do? So thank you for at least providing, you know, some basic information for everybody to actually have access to. So appreciate that. For all of our participants that are here, I will be sending out a recording of this link if you'd like to, a link of the recording, if you'd like to go back and review the information again, or share the information with someone else that also may find the information to be beneficial. As well as you can always go to our Facebook page and take a look at the presentation there as well. And it will be posted. Oh, okay. Thank you, Ms. Nori. There was a link that was put, Texas rules and standards. I have it here. Appreciate you. I will put it in the chat as well as make sure that it is included as part of the resources for everyone to actually have access to as well. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah, that took a lot of time. I would have been navigating and kind of looking all through everything. So appreciate that. So yes, I will definitely make sure that that is included also with the link in with the resources and referral information, as well as Mr. Omar's contact information if you guys are interested or feel the need to contact this office for service. If you feel the need, I don't want to say if you want to sue your employer for insurance, that's probably not the verbiage I wanted to use, but if you find yourself in dispute over disability claims or insurance claims and things like that, then please feel free to reach out to Mr. Amar. So again, thank you very much for this information. We hope that you all have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon. Tomorrow, let's see what we've got coming up. Part of our will clinic is coming up tomorrow, and Thursday is the part 2 of our wills and estate planning presentation, which is going to be covering clearing title for inherited property, what happens after your loved one passes away, the whole probate process and what that is like, and when you've got multiple heirs for different properties and things of that nature is coming up on Thursday at 1 p.m. So and definitely encourage you all to reach out and sign up for that one if you have not already done so, to get that information as well. So with that being said, you all have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon. We will give you all of your time back. So thank you very much, Ms. Sarah. We really appreciate Ms. Maylene. Thank you very much, Ms. Kathy. Thank you all for continuing to participate, Ms. Monica. And tune in for these presentations that we have on a weekly basis. So if there is something that we don't currently offer or have not offered yet, and you guys would like to see it, then please feel free to reach out to Myra or myself and let us know. Next month, our partners will be meeting to kind of go over our schedule for the 2024 sessions. So reach out to us, let us know what you guys want to hear, what's the latest and greatest and new that you guys want more information about. So we look forward to hearing from you. Ms. Grace, thank you very much as always. You all have a wonderful remainder of your afternoon, and take care of yourselves and stay safe, stay cool, check on your neighbors, your other relatives, loved ones. to make sure that everybody's okay and at least has water and things of that nature. So, all right, y'all take care, and we will talk with you all later and see you soon.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Amar. All right.